So you came here probably because the title of this video is What is Ecstatic Poetry? And we've talked about a lot, but what is ecstatic poetry? I don't claim to have all the answers, but I claim surely to have found my own answers, and I'd like to share those with you today. After years and years of study, contemplation, teaching ecstatic poetry, really collaborating with other people, other poets, other writers, other visionary artists. Myself and my poet partners, my collaborators, we've come up with a definition for ecstatic poetry, something that we really feel like puts a pin in or answers the question, what is ecstatic poetry? And I'm excited to share it with you today. So I'd like to share it, and then I'd like to kind of unpack it a little bit and break it down and talk about what it means. The definition statement goes like this. Ecstatic poetry is a devotional practice which seeks to connect both poet and reader to their innate longing for their essence. I'll say it one more time. Ecstatic poetry is a devotional practice which seeks to connect both poet and reader to their innate longing for their essence. So let's unpack that for a little while. As best I can reckon, as best I can discern, there are four kind of beats or four kind of core elements present in our definition statement. The first one is devotion or devotional practice. The second one is connection, right? So devotion, connection. The third one is longing, this innate longing. And what are we longing for? Well, according to this idea, we're longing for essence. So let's start there. Let's start with this idea of essence. When we were first crafting this definition statement, this mission, this pin that we wanted to put into the world of ecstatic poetry and say, this is who we are, this is what this is. There was the first and kind of most primordial element of ecstatic poetry was this idea of transcendence, this idea of me and God, whoever God is, sitting together in a room, communing with one another, learning from one another, experiencing one another. But we didn't want to use the word God. God is a very charged word in most cultures in the world today. And when we settled on essence, this idea of our personal essence, if you will, essence capital E, it immediately felt right. So maybe we'll kind of go through the definition statement in a bit of a reverse order, because the next piece of it is longing. Who doesn't feel a longing for something that's a little bit elusive, something that's out there? In Buddhism, there's this concept of dukkha. Dukkha is a Sanskrit word that is often translated incorrectly to just suffering. Just suffering. There's this misconception that Buddhism is this dismal practice or spiritual path. In fact, this Buddhist idea of dukkha is better translated as pervasive unsatisfactoriness. Everyone, all of you who are watching this video right now, and myself absolutely included, experience this idea of dukkha, pervasive unsatisfactoriness. There's something that isn't quite right with my life, something I want that I can't quite reach out and touch, some longing for something that's elusive to me. Khalil Gibran said, "In the will of man there is a longing that turns the mist inside us to sun." And that's precisely the idea behind this ecstatic poetry definition statement, that we can harness our longings, use our longings that have for most of our lives felt almost like a hindrance. Why am I longing for this elusive thing that I can't quite reach out and touch? In ecstatic poetry, in this paradigm of ecstatic poetry, we say, aha, but your longing can turn that mist inside you into sun. You can use your longing in the practice of ecstatic poetry, harness it to tap into or contact your essence or, if you like, the idea of God inside of you. So backing up a little bit further in the mission statement, there's this idea of connection. Ecstatic poetry is a devotional practice that seeks to connect, right? And that's this idea. The idea is that we're going to first connect with our longing. Stop calling it names. Oh, I wish I didn't have this longing. Oh, I wish it would just go away. I wish I could sate this thing. And instead we're going to reach out and touch it. The practice and path of ecstatic poetry. And by the way, I don't just mean writing ecstatic poetry. I certainly mean just loving ecstatic poetry, reading ecstatic poetry will allow you to reach out and stop being so afraid, and touch your longing for what? For your own essence. Finally, there's an element of practice. And I like this element. The definition statement begins with this idea of practice. It immediately tells us ecstatic poetry is so powerful and can do such good in our lives, but you can't be lazy about it. You can't just read a poem and expect magic to happen. You can't just write a poem and expect all your problems to be solved. So we, myself and my collaborators in the ecstatic poetry community, we believe that in order to kind of sink down in this journey towards our essences, the first thing we have to do is commit to practicing with understanding ecstatic poetry, writing ecstatic poetry, reading ecstatic poetry. I'd like to tell you one more time, ecstatic poetry is a devotional practice that seeks to connect both poet and reader to their innate longing for their essence. This definition statement has been tried and true in lots of ways. We've taken it on the road. We've shared it with writers and poets, with literary scholars, with teachers, faculty members at various universities, and everyone has kind of had the same response. Oh, yeah, that is what it does. That is what it is. So I hope it makes sense to you, and I hope that you can, if it's right for you over time, learn to wield ecstatic poetry as a force for good and positive change and transformation in your lives.